LSU. Big news in the LSU world. As we said, Corey Raymond out. The godfather of DBU. Interesting, Jake, because Florida has always wanted to claim the title of DBU. And so they've taken it one step further up the ante and just straight up now snagged the architect of DBU. And how about this, Jake? Billy Napier, and somebody who knows this state so well, he's assembling a bit of a Louisiana goon squad here. A super team, if you will, right? He brings over Patrick Toney, who was with him at UL, a guy that played at Southeastern, actually originally from Cali, so, not super like Louisiana, but he played here, he's coached here, he's been here for years and years and years, right? So Patrick Toney's going to be your safety secondary coach, defensive coordinator. We already knew that he hired Jabbar Jalouk, who we all know his Louisiana resume, Nolan native, Southern Jag, Louisiana legend, been at LSU, right? He knows the state through and through. Well, now Napier gets the big dog, Corey Raymond, a guy who played here, went to league, longest tenured member on the staff here, been here since 2012, a man who, in terms of players that he, okay, so he's been here since 2012, Jake. What is that, like 10 years, basically?
Yeah.
It gets confusing around, whatever, 10 years.
No, it's 10 seasons.
Is it? Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. 7 first-team All-Americans in 10 years. First-team All-Americans. Eric Reed, Jalen Mills, Jamal Adams, Trey White, Greedy Williams, Grant Talbot, Derek Stingley Jr. 14 players drafted in 10 years, soon to be 15. Billy Napier came and got that man. So what I love about this, Jake, it's kind of fascinating because here you have Napier assembling, like I said, a Louisiana goon squad, a super team trying to come and take on the boot, take players out of the boot, and they are now going to do war with maybe the guy who is the best at what they do in Frank Wilson, right? Like their own godfather, the guy who kind of paved the way, their former leader who now works for the new guy. So already, the Florida and LSU rivalry is just gaining spice this offseason for a multitude of reasons, and Corey Raymond just ratchets that thing up to another level.
Yeah, we'll see. Rivalry, 4, 5, 7, 9, 13 of 20.
Oh.
I don't really know what kind of rivalry it's been lately, but we'll see. We'll see what they're able to do. Look, at the end of the day, now it is what it is. Those coaches are Florida coaches, and you've got LSU coaches, and they've got a lot of Louisiana flair, but you can't allow them to come into Louisiana and get any recruit that you want. Now you have to flex on them. That's what you have to do, right? And you've got the advantage. We just rolled down what that series has been lately. So here it is. It's another challenge. It's another Florida LSU rivalry situation. Just this time it's off the field and not on the field. Billy Napier is trying to get coaches that have deep ties with Louisiana so he can come in, especially I would assume the New Orleans area and the Lafayette area. That's probably the two areas more than any that he's going to try to steal players from you, okay? You've beat them on the field. Now you got to go beat them on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, and it's so funny again because, like I said, Frank Wilson allies with many of these guys at other times in his career. Now they will be going head-to-head. But let's not make too much of it here like Frank's at just some huge disadvantage because he's got a couple new powerful allies as well. Maybe foremost among them, like we said, Brad Davis. Again, fun fact, LSU started 11 different offensive line this year. That's the most in the country, and I think that Coach Davis actually did a fantastic job by years in. That was an O-line that was pretty awful at the beginning. And this is the hardest thing for people to accept because, and I said it, but I know the offense got worse in a lot of ways as the season went on, but ironically, the O-line did actually get better. Like the mistakes they were making in the beginning they were not making those same mistakes. And you saw development from young guys, and he's the Baton Rouge native.
You can tell by what Ted Davis-Price did, too.
Yes.
TDP has some room to run, and that is because the offensive line, and that's because Brad Davis came up with schemes that fit the personnel that they had. They weren't a gap scheme team, but they switched to it because they realized they could not be a zone scheme team. Just was not going to work. They couldn't do it against Central Michigan. They couldn't do it against anyone. So what they did is they took a look at what they had, who they had available, and they said, hey, we've got to figure this thing out, and they started to run some gap schemes.
Yeah, it's crazy too to think that this is once in a line that averaged negative yards before contact a couple games, and
More
then
than a
TDP ended up as a 1,000-yard rusher. Okay, so Brad Davis did a hell of a job this year. Also, he is someone that as well is Louisiana through and through. Baton Rouge native, pride in the state, pride in the school. A comforter, obviously feels secure here because both the AD and the head coach approve him. So Frank Wilson getting a nice ally there. And then Kerry Cooks is kind of the wild card in all of this. Because was Kerry Cooks always going to be the guy instead of Raymond? Was he the response to the Raymond move, which maybe LSU got wind of it a couple days ago, or was a vision for Cooks and Raymond to be together? We don't really know yet.
When it was announced, a lot of people just assumed that meant Durante was out. They didn't think that meant Corey was out. They thought that meant that you were going to have a safeties coach and a corners coach, and it wasn't going to be Durante, just because I think a lot of people assumed and a lot of people were told that Corey Raymond was a guarantee to be on this staff. So that, like when the news broke yesterday, I was on air, and that's all the chatter that I saw. And so I think people got even more surprised when they found out, no, it was Corey Raymond. So now you got a situation where you've got to find out, are you going to have two defensive backs coaches because you've done it in the past? And if Durante is, in fact, staying on, which we don't know that yet either, that would make a lot of sense.
Is there an accepted staff makeup in terms of having a safeties and a corner coach? Like, is there a kind of
I don't love
is there a majority like in today's staff construction? I feel like I see kind of like a coin toss. Like that's what I'm saying. Like some people do it, some people don't.
I don't love it. I don't love
really?
it because you have two different rooms and you work so closely together. And you have checks that are relayed to each other, and I think you miss a lot of the communication. I just do. You don't have fullbacks and running backs are in the same room.
It'd be like having like a tackle room and then like a guard and center room.
When you've got to communicate and talk to each other.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to have that, hey, we learned this at the same time by the same person with the same verbiage in the same way. So that way there's no miscommunication, because if the safeties coach is teaching the same thing as the DB coach, the corner coach, but it's a little bit different, that can get lost. I mean, we've all played, what's it, Telephone Pictionary?
Yeah. Just the game
Whatever
of
it's
telephone.
called.
Yeah, the game of telephone. Where like you say something to one person, then they have to say it, and then by the time you get around the room, it's completely warped.
Right. So it's a little bit of that. So I don't actually love that dynamic. And I know LSU has a safeties room and a corners room over there that they probably will keep that.
So ideally for you, this potentially means in that Durante Jones may. That's a weird way of framing it, because I'm not saying that you ideally want Durante Jones gone.
No.
You've been an advocate for Durante. Yes, I want to be clear about that.
No, but if Durante's the defensive coordinator, he wouldn't be necessarily in that room every day. He would coach that position, but he would go to the linebackers. He'd go to the D-line.
So you talk about being the DC, and maybe that's where Kerry Cooks gets a bit interesting. Not that he will be the DC, but he has that experience. So first off, as a player, I do like this from Kerry Cooks. How about this, Jake? We're talking about grit. Team captain at Iowa. All Big Ten in 97. I don't know if you get more gritty than being a team captain of Iowa in 1997. Was Ferentz still there back then?
Probably.
I'm just going to say yes. Fifth-round pick of the Vikings. Bounce around the NFL, not a big deal. He does pass the eyeball test. This dude looks like a no-nonsense guy. Like, he looks like he gets on your ass. And he's had, though, in the coaching realm, he has had a ton of postseason success. Okay, he was the co-DC on the Notre Dame Natty run in 2012. He was the assistant DC at OU for 3 different playoff runs. And although we all kind of roll our eyes when we think about that Notre Dame team that made the Natty, because what happens at the end, they were a very good defense that entire year. And although we roll our eyes at Oklahoma's defense a lot of times, from 15 to 18, when he was there, their pass defense was at the top of the Big 12 for whatever that's worth. So this is a cat that is intimately familiar with Brian Kelly and does have a really nice resume of his own. Now, of course, he doesn't have the NFL output or talent that a Corey Raymond does. So what this is all going to tell us over time is how much of this success was specific to Raymond and how much of it is being at LSU, where, I mean, if there is one thing that Louisiana as a state just seems to overflow with, it is elite defensive back talent, right? We don't have alignment, but we got defensive backs for days. And I'm interested to see how this plays out over time.
And You did have some current players come out last night and say LSU is still DBU. I saw Tyrann Mathieu quote tweeted it and kind of said, I think he had a couple emojis. He kind of had the same thing. So, yes, it is a loss. Yes, it's someone that we all respect. It's somebody that we have close relationship with. But what you just said is exactly right. Like, you're still going to have the Jimmies and Joes. You've got to coach them up. Like, you still got that challenge of doing that. But LSU is DBU because of the type of player that it brings in. It's built into the fabric. Now, Corey Raymond did a fantastic job of making that go to another level, and that's going to be the challenge of the new staff here. But you're still going to have the mentality and the defensive backs that you're always going to have because it is just built into the DNA of Louisiana. Mm-hmm. Now, that's like 80% of it. That other 20%, that's got to happen to make it continue being DBU. When you look at the pass numbers over the last couple of years, over the last 5 years, they've actually gone down. Like, you haven't been as good. That's not throwing blame at one person. That's multiple people. But it's got to get back to being that DBU where you're top 10 in the country in pass defense, and teams are terrified to throw it over the middle against you.
Yeah, and I want to explore that more a bit later on. We'll circle back around to this a little bit later in the show. So, obviously, the huge news. Corey Raymond not just leaving, but leaving and going to Florida, a school that has tried to claim the title of DBU in the past, has been rebuffed, but is now literally taken the godfather of DBU to try to stake their claim. Also, Billy Napier, like we said, assembling a Louisiana goon squad because they're going to recruit Florida, but obviously if you can recruit Florida and Louisiana, well, then that's a nice foundation.
Florida's got to start recruiting
build.
Florida because right now you've got to go all the way to the 16th rated prospect in Florida to find a Florida commit.
Wow.
16th.
Damn.
So that's one of the challenges. They
Is Napier off base going so Louisiana-centric with this then?
That's what I was about to say. They might want to come into Louisiana and do some recruiting, but they better take care of their backyard as well, this new staff, because the old staff just did not do a great job.
Now, to be fair, I don't know if Florida's ever Corey Raymond's territory, but he's gotten guys out of Florida or no? I mean, Pat P came out of Florida, but that was pre-Raymond.
That was pre-Raymond,
No, that was pre-Raymond.
Raymond was at Nebraska then. Or no, actually, it was at Utah State or Nevada.
Interesting. Either way, that Florida recruiting Florida, not too relevant to our interests, right? Florida recruiting LSU, very relevant. That's what they're trying to do with Corey Raymond. LSU staff continues to take shape as they hire Kerry Cooks. Did I say that wrong? Yeah, Kerry Cooks. We went through his resume if you want to look it up in hour number one. A couple interesting things to note. LSU's, to show you, Jake, that we're all navigating turbulent waters right now, right? A lot of the LSU reaction to this has been that, wow, Florida has so much positive momentum. Like LSU fans, right? Billy Napier is killing it down there in Gainesville. Here's a line.
It's 20th, by the way. Sorry. 20th player in Florida, not 17th.
Here's a line from a Gators 247 article. The final line of the Corey Raymond announcing that they had hired Corey Raymond article. It says, suffice to say, Raymond's addition should go a long way to calming the nerves of the Gator Nation after a trying few days. So although we all think that it's been all positive headlines and roses over there and everybody's loving the hire, you can tell they're in the same boat. We are both in the regime change boat and everything that comes along with it. Everybody's freaking out all over the country. The Raymond hire is a big get for them. Here is the dirty debate, Jake, that I don't know how to have, but it is worth mentioning, which is how good has the LSU pass defense been recently? Just from a statistical
2018
standpoint.
Was definitely their best year in a long time, and the stats have gone down. Now, you're talking about three different defensive coordinators. But obviously, in 19, it went down. In 2020, it went way down. And then it got back up. I think 90. It was at 97th this year.
So here it is. This is from the past 5 years. 2017, they ranked 19th. Damn good. 2018, 30th. 2019, 51st. National championship year for what it's worth. 2020, 127th. And then 2021, 91st. So it's a bit odd because we still claim DBU, and you've still put very good players into the NFL in those 5 years, and yet the overall numbers are really nothing to write home about. 17, 18 are really good. If you're in the top 30, I'd say that's a success. You're doing your job. That's great. But even in 2019, 51st is not. That's like barely above middle of the pack. Obviously, 2020 and 2021 are just kind of abysmal, especially 2020. So I guess how much of that is on Raymond, I guess, is the question. Because obviously it's not just on one guy. And like I said, he's still developed and recruited really good talent, but it has not been as productive as the past.
Yeah. And look, as much as this news was upsetting yesterday, and I completely honest, I said it at the beginning of the show, like Corey Raymond was a coach at LSU when I was playing. I mean, he was a GA. I have a long-standing relationship with him, so there's a bias to that part of it. But also, I have to take that out, and I have to say, if I'm excited about Brian Kelly being the head coach at LSU, like we were and are, and we talked about that in length, how excited we were and what we thought this could do for the LSU football program, you have to trust in that. Like, you can't waver on that just because of one move or two moves. You have to trust in that process of what his vision for this program is. Mm-hmm. And if it comes out that that wasn't part of his vision, then you can't go back and forth. You can't teeter-totter. That's just not what you can do and be respectable. So you have to say, all right, this is what it is. This is going to be the team in his mold. And so let's see what happens here.
Yeah, and I do also want to be clear that I know I sound a bit like the Fansville Dr. Pepper commercial, right? Where the kid enters the transfer portal, and after begging him not to leave, it's like, well, I never thought he was that good anyway. I'm not saying that about Corey Raymond. I think Corey Raymond's resume does speak for itself. I do think, though, that I do lack a bit of perspective on Raymond in that with Moffitt's departure, right, that hits very close to home. I could speak on that from a lot of personal experience. With Corey Raymond, it's a lot more anecdotal. It's a lot more hearing other guys talk about him. Like, I can't actually speak to, and he came the year after me, so not even being like a member of the staff, but I can't speak to being in that room, what it's like being trained by him, like a Trey White can or any of these other cats. And so I'm probably not the best to comment on what he has like really meant to LSU and the staff and the state and the team over the past decade. And so it is a little tough for me to see just how impactful this will be. Again, like Jake said, it's kind of like the Max Johnson thing. I don't think there's any way of spinning this as a positive because it's not. You don't lose a guy with that resume, that caliber, that level of trust, all of these things, and have it be as positive. I just don't know how much of an impactful negative it is just yet.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to tell. And obviously, we don't even know what the dynamic of the staff looks like. Like, we know names now, but they haven't been placed in positions. And there's only going to be more names that come on board here in the next couple of days and weeks. And we don't even know coordinator-wise who's going to be leading this defense. So there's still a lot to be played out. Obviously, like this news last night, I knew as soon as it came across what this would mean to a lot of people. And it is big news. Just like Max was very big news. Max, regardless of how you feel, his stats and what he did for LSU, you're losing a lot. There's a lot to lose there. And let's just call it like it is. And we said this yesterday, but if you missed it, LSU is in a very unique position that they've been the same for 20 years. They no other place. I was talking to Doring. We were recording pregame in the SEC last night, and we were talking about this. He said, Hess, I've never seen a place that has so many of the same people for 2 decades and multiple coaches. He said, I've always, from afar, thought that was very unique, and you just don't see that everywhere. But because we were in it, we were in the middle of it, like we knew it, but did we really understand it? Same strength staff, trainers, equipment, video personnel, office workers. I mean, everybody was the same through 3 coaches. That literally never happens. You barely do you make it 2 coaches, but 3. So this inevitably was going to happen and eventually was going to happen. And you always knew it was probably going to be like we're feeling today. But now that it's here, now we're in that moment, now it's present, like it's probably hitting a lot of people a little bit harder. But this is just how it was always going to be. You just had this long run of stability and same, people in place. And look, you won 3 national championships with those coaches. It worked. It absolutely worked. But 5-5 and 6-6, a lot of it started to fall apart. And so that's probably what Brian Kelly saw, and that's what he's seeing every single day, and he's trying to bring the best people that he thinks can bring that next national championship. Again, it's uncomfortable. I completely agree with that. I understand that, but you have to trust in the coach that LSU brought in, and he knows what he's doing right now, and we won't know if that trust is warranted until we get to the season.
Jason Bourgeois says, safe to say losing Raymond hurts more from a recruiting aspect as opposed to a coaching standpoint. I think I've seen a lot of this. Jake, I'd ask you if you agree. I mean, certainly the recruiting, I think, that is probably where the most next level performance has taken place. But I mean, how much of the, like we said, how much of the coaching aspect is on him? Because you said something earlier that kind of stuck with me where you were like, LSU needs to go back to being where, like, you are afraid to throw over the middle. And, like, it's interesting because Raymond takes care of the cornerbacks, and the cornerbacks have been great still, right, under his tutelage. So I don't want to sell, like, because that comment echoes the sentiment I've seen a lot. I don't want to sell him short on the coaching front, because when teams have made their hay, like even bringing up the pass defense, when teams have made their hay over the last couple of years, it's mainly been avoiding the corners or well, admittedly, actually, like, kind of taking advantage of putting them in confusing situations at a time, which maybe would go to them. But most of that success is taking place over the middle.
Yeah, you're talking about safety position.
Like safety, like it seems like linebackers got manipulated a bit. It's just that still at the end of the Corey Raymond era,
just look when Jay Ward
made
was
mistakes.
Yeah,
they were still.
I mean, just look like at one player. Like when Jay Ward wasn't on the defense this year, it felt like all hell broke loose.
Yeah,
like it doesn't need to be that way. Like you need to have more than just one of those players ready to go. And as much as we talk about the corners, and they deserve to be talked about, LSU's safeties during this DBU run have been just as much or more of a reason of why they've been who they've been. I mean, we could go way back. I say way back. I'm LaRon Landry, Craig Stelch, Jamal Adams. I mean, we could have that conversation, right? But it's a position that I would love to see get back to what it was, where you were scared to throw the football between the hashes. You were scared to run certain concepts.
Safety position's odd too, because
it's a position that they've missed a couple times.
Well, they've missed a couple times, but at the beginning of the Raymond era, they did not miss, and that's when he had control of the entire room.
Yeah,
when it was safety and corners, and it does kind of time up to where when they brought in Bill Bush and started splitting that room and going safety corner, like that is actually when the safety group started to falter quite a bit for whatever that's worth. So it's rough. It's rough. Corey Raymond's a great coach. Means a ton to LSU. And I did misspeak a little bit earlier when we were talking about titles. I said he got the associate head coach title. I forgot. That's not actually true. He got a very – and this is why I can't tell, was this really Florida plucking him away, or was LSU also kind of planning to move on? Because he got the assistant coach of the defense title. A little bit like being the assistant to the regional manager, right? Assistant head coach of the defense, which I've never really heard. And Napier seems to be kind of throwing out titles left and right. Like, who was it? Like, I think Patrick Toney is technically the safeties, secondary, and co-defensive coordinator. So
it's a way to get more money.
Yeah.
When you throw another title on there, you can say, the linebacker coach can be like, wait a minute, that assistant that's coaching the DBs is making how much? And but he's the assistant head coach of the defense too.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
It's how Frank Wilson makes $950K, and Polian, special teams coordinator, makes $575 because he is the associate head coach. So whatever it's worth, we'll see how this we'll see how this plays out over time. But big news yesterday: Cooks in, Raymond out, Brad Davis in. The staff continues to take place. We'll leave you with a little super chat here from Dane Bergeron. Says Napier may be simulating a goon squad, but LSU has Machine Gun Kelly and his Irish Mafia. Kelly will be the capo de tutte capo of the SEC in 3 years.
There's some nickname potential there that I hadn't even.
Is that known? Do people call him Machine Gun Kelly?
I mean, that's what I call Chad Kelly, but I can change it.
Well, Chad Kelly has very Machine Gun Kelly vibes. I don't know if Brian Kelly has Machine Gun Kelly vibes.
I don't know. You've seen that picture where he's wearing the beanie and the glasses and he's got a smoke hanging out his lip.
And to be fair,
holding the heaters.
Machine Gun Kelly, a bit of a chameleon. Once a rapper, now like an emo pop punk guy. Okay. Brian Kelly, once a masshole, now Down here, just a little Southern gentleman. Okay, dude, I see you. I see Machine Gun Kelly. There you go, bro. I'll ride with you. MGK. I actually don't like his music.
I couldn't tell you a song, but I'll learn it.
Let's get back to more on this.